Welcome to the Randy Report. I'm Randy Slovacek, your host. I'm also the writer and editor of therandyreport.com, where you can find me every single day on the internet reporting on the daily news cycle in terms of politics, pop culture, and entertainment news of interest to the LGBTQ community and its allies. In this week's headlines, King Charles III attended the unveiling of the United Kingdom's first national monument to LGBTQ veterans, 25 years after the country lifted its ban on homosexuality in the military. The U.S. Virgin Islands is the first American territory to allow transgender people to change their gender markers. And out-action movie star Luke Evans will make his Broadway debut next spring in a new revival of The Rocky Horror Show. All that and more in this episode of The Randy Report. Earlier this week, King Charles III attended the unveiling of the United Kingdom's first national monument to LGBTQ veterans, 25 years after the country lifted its ban on homosexuality in the military. The king also met and shook hands with LGBTQ veterans during the ceremony. The monument, named An Opened Letter, resembles a crumpled sheet of paper comprised of various words and phrases including inclusion, respect, and a battle for love, which were taken from evidence collected against LGBTQ former members of the military. Erecting the monument was just one of 49 recommendations outlined in the Atherton Review, a 2023 report on the mistreatment of LGBTQ people in the UK military between 1967 and 2000. That policy was lifted in January 2000 following a ruling from the European Court of Human Rights, which declared that it violated service members' right to privacy. In 2023, then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak formally apologized for the ban. LGBTQ people who were members of the UK military during the ban are now eligible for financial restitution under the government's LGBT Financial Recognition Scheme, which was announced last year. Eligible veterans who were dismissed under the policy may receive a payment of £50,000 with impact payments of up to £20,000 for those who were bullied, assaulted, forced to undergo unnecessary medical exams, or who experienced other forms of mistreatment. Judges in Texas may refuse to marry same-sex couples if doing so would violate their, quote, sincerely held religious beliefs, according to a new judicial rule quietly enacted by the Texas Supreme Court last week. On October 24th, the High Court issued an order modifying the Texas Code of Judicial Conduct, which lays out rules for judges in the state. The code states that a judge's quote-unquote extrajudicial activities should not cast reasonable doubt on the judge's capacity to act impartially as a judge. But the court's newly adopted comment creates an exception to that rule, specifically for marriage rights, stating that, quote, it is not a violation for a judge to publicly refrain from performing a wedding ceremony based upon a sincerely held religious belief. The comment effectively protects Texas judges from official sanctions if they say their religion prohibits them from marrying a same-sex couple. The change was made as a result of the State Commission on Judicial Conduct's decision to sanction Judge Diane Hensley in 2019 for her refusal to marry same-sex couples. Hensley's argument bears some similarities to those made by Kim Davis, the infamous former Kentucky County Clerk who was ordered to pay $100,000 in damages in 2023 for refusing to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples in the wake of the landmark 2015 Obergefell ruling. Davis is currently asking the Supreme Court to revisit that decision, although conservative Justices Samuel Alito and Amy Coney Barrett have seemed to express some reluctance to do so. The court is scheduled to decide whether it will hear Davis's case on November 7th. The U.S. Virgin Islands has become the first American territory to officially recognize transgender and intersex residents through a new executive order allowing gender marker changes on ID documents. Governor Albert Bryan Jr. signed the executive order on October 15th, establishing a formal process for Virginia Islanders to update their birth certificates and government IDs to reflect their gender identity. The order permits adults to request gender marker changes through a written application, while parents or guardians may apply on behalf of minors. Applicants must provide a healthcare provider's statement verifying an intersex condition or a court order approving the change. The policy also replaces the term sex with gender on official documents, aligning the territory with more than 24 U.S. states, Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia that have implemented similar measures. Last year, Governor Bryan's proposed bill to codify the same rights stalled in the legislature. Rather than let the effort fade, he enacted the change through executive authority, a move celebrated by LGBTQ advocates as both strategic and humane. The Virgin Islands' new policy builds on an existing framework of LGBTQ protections. The territory already bans discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation and has no restrictions on gender-affirming healthcare, athletic participation, or public restroom access. At a time when many U.S. states are advancing legislation targeting transgender people, the Virgin Islands' action stands out as a beacon of inclusion. Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Iowa, Kansas, and Oklahoma continue to block residents from updating their gender markers on birth certificates, with several extending the ban to state IDs. For trans and intersex people, accurate identification is a matter of safety and self-determination. It can mean avoiding harassment, being able to apply for housing or jobs without scrutiny, and living authentically without explanation. This goes out to the Broadway fans. Luke Evans, the handsome out actor who portrayed Gaston in the live-action remake of Disney's Beauty and the Beast, has been announced to make his Broadway debut as Dr. Frankenfurter in a new revival of the Rocky Horror Show. The musical, to be directed by Tony Award winner Sam Pinkleton, who currently has Oh Mary on the boards, will begin its run in March 2026 at Studio 54, with an opening night scheduled for April 23rd. This will be the third time the show has landed on Broadway, first in 1975, followed by a revival in 2000. In an official press statement, director Sam Pinkleton said, quote, "I'm giddy to crack this untamable classic open with the razor-sharp Luke Evans at the center, and I hope to do at Studio 54 what the Rocky Horror Show has done for people around the world for decades. Open a dimension to another possible reality." End quote. Luke Evans is definitely no stranger to the stage, having appeared in the West End productions of Rent and Miss Saigon before establishing himself as a Hollywood leading man in movies like The Clash of the Titans, The Hobbit, and Fast and Furious 6. The Rocky Horror Show first debuted in 1973 in London at the Royal Court Theatre. Of course, the 1975 film, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, is an iconic cult classic featuring the unforgettable Tim Curry as Dr. Frankenfurter. And that brings me to the end of this episode of The Randy Report. If you enjoy catching up on LGBTQ news in a quick podcast, I'd appreciate it if you'd share it with your friends. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss an episode. I like to think of The Randy Report as the 60 minutes of gay news, only shorter. And remember, you can find me every single day on the internet at therandyreport.com, where I cover the daily news cycle in terms of politics, pop culture, and entertainment news of interest to the LGBTQ community and its allies. Thanks for listening, folks. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.